Brought to you by JEGS.
Today's carburetors from Holley offer better out-of-the-box performance than ever, with models available that are suitable for a wide range of engine types, sizes, and applications. Once you've selected the right Holley carb for your engine, some basic tuning steps will be necessary to ensure your carburetor performs at its best. Before you begin, you'll need to gather a few tools, unpack the carburetor, and examine it to get familiar with it. You may notice some fluid remaining in the carburetor or a solvent smell. This is normal. Every Holley carburetor is factory flow tested before shipment, and a small amount of liquid will remain. Please note that Holley mechanical secondary double pumper carburetors are not recommended for use with automatic overdrive transmissions or Ford automatic transmissions that require a kickdown lever. To tune your carb, you'll need a vacuum gauge, a tachometer, a Phillips screwdriver, an assortment of wrenches, a Holley jet tool, and Holley's small parts and tuning kit for your model carburetor. Before you begin, you should also make sure your ignition components like spark plugs, plug wires, distributor cap, and rotor are all in good condition and that the ignition timing is properly set. Your Holley carburetor is designed for a fuel pressure range of between a high of 7 psi at idle and a low of 5 psi at wide open throttle, so check your fuel pressure and adjust the regulator if applicable. Inspect your air and fuel filters for cleanliness and ensure that there are no vacuum or fuel leaks in any hoses or gaskets. Take a few moments to familiarize yourself with the instructions provided with your new Holley carburetor. It will help you identify the different components of your carb and the various vacuum and fuel fittings. Follow along as we show you how to adjust fuel level, set idle mixture, install the correct power valve, adjust the accelerator pump operation, and set basic jetting. The first step is setting the proper fuel level in the float bowls. With the vehicle on level ground with the engine running, remove the primary float bowl sight plug. Loosen the fuel level lock screw and turn the adjusting nut clockwise to lower the fuel level and counterclockwise to raise it. When fuel slowly trickles out of the sight hole, the level is properly set. Tighten the lock screw and replace the sight plug. Then repeat the process on the secondary float bowl. Use caution to prevent excessive fuel spillage and potential fires. With the fuel level set, adjust the carb idle speed screw until the engine is idling at the desired RPM. Before installing your carburetor, you should make sure both idle mixture screws are set to full lean, turned all the way in clockwise, then backed out 1.5 turns. With your vacuum gauges attached to the manifold vacuum port, adjust both idle mixture screws 1/8 of a turn at a time, alternating between each screw until the highest vacuum reading is achieved. With the idle mixture set, adjust the carb idle screw to return to your desired idle RPM if necessary. The idle vacuum reading will determine the appropriate power valve size for your engine. For automatic transmissions, measure with the car in gear and your foot on the brake. For manual transmissions, idle with the gearbox in neutral or the clutch disengaged. If the reading is up to 12 inches of mercury, divide by 2 and round up to the next available size. If it's over 12, use a 6.5 power valve. The power valve and main jets are located on the primary metering block, while the secondary jets are located in the secondary metering block. To access the power valve or jets, you will need to remove the appropriate float bowl. With the engine off and something handy available to capture spilled fuel, remove the float bowl to access the metering block. The power valve simply screws into the carburetor side of the metering block while the jets are accessed from the float bowl inside. Use the proper jet tool rather than a flat-bladed screwdriver prevents damage to the jets which can harm performance. Stock Holley carburetor jetting is generally a good starting point. For most double pumpers, a spread of 6 sizes between primary and secondary jets is recommended, but you can go as high as 8 sizes to run rich best at wide open throttle for added protection against detonation. Tuning is best performed on an engine or chassis dyno, but for most owners, the next best place is at the track, where you can safely and consistently run your car. Most 200 to 300 horsepower engines will run well with 64 primary and 70 secondary jets as a starting point. You can further tune your primaries by driving at part throttle on a long stretch of road so that the secondaries are closed. Jet down your primaries in 2 size increments until you feel the engine surge at part throttle. Then jet up by 2 sizes for the lean best setting. Secondaries can be set at the track by jetting up or down in 2-size increments and keeping an eye on elapsed times and trap speeds. The accelerator pumps are the key to proper throttle response and drivability. Best performance is achieved by delivering the pump shot at the exact rate required by the engine. Accelerator pump adjustment begins with making sure that the slightest movement of the throttle results in movement of the pump operating lever. This is adjusted by compressing or relaxing the pump override spring. Make sure that the fast idle cam lever is disengaged so that the operating lever opens all the way. Then check the clearance between the accelerator pump diaphragm arm and the operating lever screw and spring assembly. The arm should barely be touching the bottom of the screw with no slack. Insert a 15 thousandths feeler gauge between the pump arm and screw bottom. The pump arm should move down slightly with the gauge inserted. Tighten or loosen the adjusting screw as appropriate. The next step is selecting the right nozzles. The size of the nozzles determines the rate and amount of fuel that's delivered. Heavy cars with tall gears will typically use smaller numbered nozzles that deliver fuel gradually, while vehicles with a higher power-to-weight ratio or shorter gearing will prefer larger nozzles that deliver fuel more quickly. Start by increasing the nozzle size by 3 numbers. After each nozzle change, run the car under normal road conditions and quickly open the throttle to see how the carburetor reacts. Continue to experiment with nozzle changes until the throttle response is crisp and clean. Double pumper carbs require secondary nozzles sized to supply fuel for a sufficient length of time so that the secondary jets can begin to deliver fuel once the secondary throttles are open. Once nozzle size has been determined, you can further tune the accelerator pump response by changing pump cams or changing the cam position. Placing the screw in position 1 activates the pump earlier, which helps engines with a relatively low idle get the right fuel as the throttle is opened, while 2 and 3 delay the pump action for engines with a higher idle. There are many ways to fine-tune your Holley carburetor for best performance on the street or at the track. For additional questions or more information about Holley carburetors, call and speak to a JEGS tech at 1-800-345-4545.
Brought to you by JEGS.